Greg. We want to go back now to Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, who's been watching the optics of all of this. And, of course, we know that Attorney General Eric Holder is there. It's been hard to see him on camera at any point. Colonel Peters, it seems odd, obviously, when you look at all these other world leaders arm in arm to not have the President of the United States standing there.
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking that I'm watching this, and it's getting more and more painful by the moment. I mean, look at that front line. You've got Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. They're both in the front rank. I mean, what can bring them together? And we have this gaping hole. Now, Eric Holder's not in the front rank because he doesn't have the rank to be in there with heads of state. He's not a head of state. He's a cabinet member, and not the most senior cabinet members, not even John Kerry, the Secretary of State there. So, you know, I'm sorry to be snide, but we've got a president who is more comfortable bowing to the king of Saudi Arabia than he is saluting a U.S. Marine. And I think what you're seeing is presidential cowardice, because if he had gone, he would have been asked uncomfortable questions. The French press weren't going to let him off the hook the way everybody in the White House press briefing room except Ed Henry lets him off the hook. He would have been asked about, is this part of Islam? Is this Islamist terror? But so we have all these leaders marching in solidarity against radical Islam, and our president's in the bunker. I mean, they used to make fun about Cheney. Well, Vice President Cheney's in the bunker. No, President Obama is cowering in the bunker, and it's a travesty. That, you know, if I may briefly, let's go back to something very, very important that Andrea Tantaro said that we don't speak about often enough, and that is she brought up the rule of law. Now, I'm a child of the 60s. One of the horrible things my generation did, and I had long hair too, we broke down respect for the rule of law. But the rule of law is a cardinal, primary treasure of Western civilization. Everything from property rights to freedom of speech. We've been able to build this triumphant civilization with the greatest degree of liberty and wealth in history because of the rule of law. And when we do not insist upon the rule of law, whether it's in a Muslim-populated banlieue on the suburbs of Paris or Ferguson, Missouri, when we do not insist on the rule of law for all, we begin to disintegrate as a nation. And so I wish we had talked more about that, but France's problem, and you just heard Greg Polcott, who's been great this week, tremendous coverage, you just heard her talking about there are no-go areas. A nation, a state, cannot tolerate zones within its borders where its police and citizens cannot go.
Lieutenant Colonel Peters, to go back to your point about the American president's lacking and President Obama not being there, it makes me hearken back to when James Foley was beheaded, and just moments after the press conference, the president goes golfing. And I mean, he was the butt of jokes on late night talk shows. Even a lot of folks in the left-wing media bashed him for it, and it seems like he couldn't get away from it for a long time. That's when we realized the severity of ISIS. Now we're realizing the scope as it's starting to spill even more into the West. Is this something that's going to be written about in the history books? Is this something that's going to really affect his legacy, or is this just something where we're looking at the screen and, oh shoot, President Obama isn't there?
No, it will affect his legacy, because while much of the media is protecting him while he's in office, when there's a sort of a decent interval, historians will have to face up to how comprehensively, disastrously failed this president has been. And he's faced many challenges, but the cardinal one clearly has been the rise of the proliferation, the metastasization of violent Islamist extremism. When Obama took office, Al-Qaeda was on the ropes. Jabhat al-Nusra didn't exist. Islamic State didn't exist. Boko Haram were a gang of thugs off in the savannah. And with his unwillingness to address this fundamental existential threat, we've seen this proliferation of radical Islam that now reaches literally across the globe. It reaches into the Americas because our president, again, he has romanticized Islam. Yeah. He has despised American imperialism.
Yes.
And I'm going to repeat myself. I usually don't do that. But here's a president who intellectually has never matured beyond the radicalism of the undergraduate, the people who wear Che Guevara T-shirts.
Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, very outspoken on this issue. We appreciate you joining